The USB drive slipped from my fingers and clattered across the hardwood floor of my bedroom, spinning to a stop beneath the dresser. I dropped to my knees, my 55-year-old joints protesting as I reached into the dusty space, my fingertips brushing against the small device that contained my mother-in-law's entire conspiracy, laid out in email drafts and legal documents. The timestamp on the files read 3 days ago, 3 days since Patricia had started planning how to take my twins away from me the moment my heart stopped beating. Before I start my story, I would love to know what city you are joining me from. Feel free to share it in the comments. Now, let me immerse you in this story. My hands shook as I pulled myself up using the dresser's edge, the USB drive now clutched so tightly in my palm that the metal edges bit into my skin. The laptop screen still glowed on my bed where I'd thrown it, displaying a draft email from Patricia to someone named Howard Milstein, Esky. I forced myself to read it again, though each word felt like ground glass in my throat. The cancer will likely take Olivia within 18 months, according to Robert's assessment. We need to establish grounds for custody now, build the case that the twins, Mia and Marcus, would be better served in our care than with Olivia's sister. The bedroom door was still closed. My husband Robert was downstairs in his study, working on patient files, completely unaware that his mother had been using his confidential medical opinions about my prognosis to build a legal strategy. I moved to the window and peered through the curtains at the driveway below. Patricia's silver Lexus sat parked behind Robert's BMW, exactly where it had been for the past 2 hours, while she'd helped him organize his home office. The office where he kept all his files. The office she'd had unlimited access to all afternoon. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, my breath fogging the window. The subdivision stretched out before me in the fading October light. Identical brick colonials with their manicured lawns, their 2-car garages, their families tucked safely inside without mother-in-laws plotting to orphan their children while they were still alive. A dog barked somewhere down the street. A garage door rumbled closed. Normal sounds from a normal Wednesday evening in a normal suburb of Chicago, except nothing about my life was normal anymore. The USB drive had arrived this morning in a plain manila envelope with no return address, just my name written in block letters. Inside, a single piece of paper with an anonymous typed message. Your mother-in-law isn't who you think she is. Everything you need is on this drive. Check the folder marked Custody Strategy. Destroy this note. I'd burned the paper in the kitchen sink before Robert came down for breakfast. I turned from the window and moved across the bedroom toward my laptop, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. The USB drive felt like a lead weight in my cardigan pocket. My fingers closed around it and I pulled it out, holding it up to the amber light of the bedside lamp. Such a small thing, barely larger than my thumbnail. Yet it contained evidence that Patricia Crawford had been building a custody case for months, waiting for me to die so she could claim my children as her own. I sank onto the edge of the bed and opened my laptop with trembling hands. The screen's glow illuminated my face as I inserted the drive, and my heart hammered against my ribcage while the files loaded. 17 folders, hundreds of documents. I clicked on one labeled Medical Assessment and watched as scanned pages filled the screen. Robert's own notes about my stage 3 ovarian cancer, his professional opinions about treatment efficacy, survival rates, prognosis timelines, all of it photocopied, all of it stolen from his files. My stomach churned. I scrolled faster, clicking through folder after folder. Financial capacity, character witnesses, home environment evaluation. Each one meticulously organized, each one building a case that I was unfit, that the children would need a stable guardian when, not if, I succumbed to the cancer eating through my body. Patricia had even compiled a dossier on my sister Maya in Austin, documenting her 2 divorces, her modest income as a yoga instructor, her studio apartment, systematically eliminating any competition for custody. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. Heavy, familiar. Robert's gate. I slammed the laptop shut and yanked the USB drive free, shoving it back into my pocket just as the bedroom door swung open. My husband stood in the doorway, his 6-foot frame filling the space, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the lamplight. He loosened his tie and smiled that tired smile I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. "Mom just left," he said. She finished helping me organize the filing cabinets. I forced my facial muscles into something resembling normalcy, but my jaw felt tight, unnatural. "That's nice of her." Robert crossed to the bed and sat beside me, the mattress dipping under his weight. He smelled like coffee and the sandalwood cologne I'd given him last Christmas. His hand found mine, warm and solid, and I had to resist the urge to pull away. How could I tell him his mother was a predator? How could I make him believe his devoted church-going mother was planning to steal our children? "You feel warm," he said, pressing his palm against my forehead. "Did you take your temperature today?" I stood abruptly, moving toward the dresser, putting distance between us. My reflection stared back from the mirror above it, hollow cheeks, dark circles under brown eyes, the purple headscarf covering my bald scalp. 6 months of chemotherapy had transformed me into someone I barely recognized. Someone dying. Someone Patricia wanted to replace. "I'm fine," I said, "just tired." Through the mirror, I watched him study me with that clinical gaze he usually reserved for patients. He was a good doctor, a good husband, a good father to Jasmine and Cole. But he was blind to his mother's machinations, deaf to anything negative about the woman who'd raised him alone after his father abandoned them. Patricia was his hero, his rock, the saint who'd worked 3 jobs to put him through medical school. The floorboards creaked downstairs. My whole body went rigid. "I thought you said she left." Robert glanced toward the door, frowning. "She did. I watched her back out of the driveway." The sound came again. Footsteps, deliberate, moving through the first floor toward the kitchen. I moved to the bedroom door and gripped the frame, my knuckles whitening. Robert stood and walked past me into the hallway, his shoes making soft thuds on the carpet runner. I followed, my pulse roaring in my ears, the USB drive burning like hot coal in my pocket. We descended the stairs together. The kitchen light was on, spilling yellow across the hardwood of the foyer. I could see a shadow moving inside, hear cabinet doors opening and closing. Robert reached the kitchen first and stopped so suddenly I nearly collided with his back. Patricia stood at our kitchen counter, her silver bob perfectly styled, her cream blazer unwrinkled despite the long day. She held a manila folder in her manicured hands, the same kind that had contained the USB drive. She looked up as we entered, and her smile was warm, practiced, utterly convincing. "I forgot this," she said, lifting the folder. "Robert, those insurance forms you needed me to notarize? They were still on the counter." But her eyes weren't on Robert. They were on me, cold and calculating behind that grandmother of the year smile. And in that moment, I knew. She hadn't forgotten anything. She'd come back to see if I'd found the USB drive. She'd come back to gauge my reaction, to assess whether her anonymous gift had landed, whether I'd taken the bait. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I forced my fingers to uncurl, pressing my palms flat against the cool fabric of my slacks. The motion steadied me enough to meet Patricia's gaze without flinching. The USB drive seemed to pulse against my thigh, a secret that weighed more with every passing second. "They're on the counter, where you left them," Robert said, moving toward the coffee maker. His voice carried that detached quality it always did when his mother appeared. Automatic, almost rehearsed. Patricia stepped around the granite island, her heels clicking against the tile in a rhythm that matched my accelerating heartbeat. She picked up a different folder, this one cream-colored instead of manila, and tucked it under her arm. But her eyes never left me. They traced the tension in my shoulders, the slight tremor I couldn't quite control in my left hand. "Olivia, you look exhausted," she said, her voice dripping with concern that felt like acid on my skin. "You really should take better care of yourself, for the children's sake." The children's sake. The words hung in the air between us like a threat wrapped in velvet. I thought of the documents on that USB drive, the custody paperwork pre-drafted with spaces for my death date, the financial statements showing how they'd already started calculating my life insurance payout. I moved to the refrigerator and pulled out a water bottle, needing something to do with my hands that wouldn't betray the fury building behind my ribs. The cold plastic grounded me. I twisted the cap, the crack of the seal breaking echoing too loud in the suddenly quiet kitchen. "I'm fine," I said, taking a long drink. The water was ice cold, shocking my system back into focus. Patricia's smile tightened at the corners, a barely perceptible shift that I'd learned to read over 15 years of marriage to her son. She set the cream folder down and crossed to where I stood, her perfume, something expensive and suffocating, filling the space between us. She reached out and placed her hand on my forearm, her fingers cool and deliberate. "You worked too hard at that hospital," she continued, squeezing gently. "All those night shifts, all that stress, it takes a toll, doesn't it? On your health?" My jaw clenched so hard I felt the ache spread to my temples. I was fishing, probing to see if I understood the subtext. The medical documentation on the drive had included notes about my schedule, my blood pressure readings from my last physical, a highlighted section about increased mortality risk for African American women in high-stress professions. I pulled my arm away slowly, deliberately, and set the water bottle on the counter with controlled precision. Behind me, Robert's coffee maker gurgled and hissed. He stood with his back to both of us, measuring cream into his mug with methodical focus, oblivious or deliberately ignorant to the confrontation playing out 3 feet from him. "The kids need me," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm not going anywhere." Patricia's eyes flashed, just for a second, before the grandmother mask slipped back into place. She picked up both folders now, tucking them against her chest like a shield. Her other hand moved to the pearl necklace at her throat, fingers working the smooth stones in a gesture I'd seen her make countless times when something wasn't going according to plan. "Of course you're not," she said, her tone saccharine. "We all want what's best for them. That's why we're family." She turned toward the hallway, her heels resuming their staccato beat against the floor. I watched her go, tracking the straight line of her spine, the confident set of her shoulders. She paused at the kitchen doorway and looked back over her shoulder. "Lock your doors tonight," she said. "There've been break-ins in the neighborhood." Then she was gone, the front door closing with a soft click that somehow sounded more ominous than a slam. I heard her car start, the engine purring to life in our driveway. Only when the sound faded completely did I allow myself to exhale. Robert turned from the counter, coffee mug in hand, steam rising in lazy spirals. He glanced toward the empty hallway, then at me, his expression blank in that way that meant he was choosing not to engage. "She means well," he said. I stared at him, at the man I'd built a life with, at the father of my children who couldn't, or wouldn't, see what his mother had become. The USB drive felt like it was burning through my pocket now, searing evidence of a conspiracy he'd probably dismiss as misunderstanding or overreaction. My phone buzzed in my other pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands. A text from an unknown number lit up the screen. "Check your daughter's Instagram. Recent posts? You need to see this." I swiped it open, my thumb fumbling over the screen protector. My daughter's feed loaded slowly, each image appearing like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known existed. There were photos from last weekend, her 15th birthday party. But interspersed between the cake and candles were others I hadn't seen her take. Pictures of Patricia and her with matching outfits. Posts about Grandma taking me shopping for my future. Comments from Patricia's friends about what a beautiful girl to carry on the Crawford legacy. My chest constricted. I scrolled faster, finding posts going back months. Patricia at school pickup, tagged by my daughter with heart emojis. Patricia at doctor's appointments I hadn't known about. Patricia everywhere, inserting herself into every corner of my children's lives while I worked doubles at the hospital, while I trusted, while I remained blind to the scaffolding being built around my family. I gripped the counter edge, the granite cold and unyielding under my palms. Robert was still talking, something about his mother's good intentions, but his voice had become white noise beneath the roar of realization flooding my system. They weren't planning to steal my children if I died. They were planning to make me irrelevant whether I lived or not. I dropped the phone onto the counter and moved toward the stairs, my legs propelling me forward before conscious thought caught up. Robert's hand caught my elbow, his fingers digging into the soft flesh above my wrist bone. "Where are you going?" His voice had shifted, taking on that careful tone he used when trying to manage situations at his law firm. I yanked my arm free, feeling the burn of friction against my skin. "To talk to my daughter." The stairs blurred beneath my feet as I climbed. My shoulder grazed the wall, knocking loose a framed photo that clattered down 3 steps behind me. Behind me, Robert's heavier footfalls followed, his dress shoes thudding against hardwood. My daughter's door stood slightly ajar, a slice of purple LED light bleeding into the hallway. I pushed it open without knocking. She sat cross-legged on her bed, phone raised mid-selfie. Her eyes widened when she saw my face. Whatever expression I wore reflected back in her sudden stillness. "Put the phone down." My voice came out rougher than intended, scraped raw. She lowered it slowly, confusion creasing her forehead. "Mom? What's wrong?" I crossed the space between us, my hand already reaching. She jerked the phone away, clutching it to me chest, but I was faster. My fingers closed around the edge of the sparkly case, and for 3 horrible seconds, we engaged in a silent tug-of-war, mother and daughter, trust disintegrating in real time. "Mom!" Her voice cracked. I pulled harder. The phone came free, and she fell back against her pillows, staring at me like I'd struck her. Heat flooded my face. My thumb found her camera roll, swiping through hundreds of images. Screenshots of text conversations with Patricia. Photos of credit cards, not mine. Bank statements showing a trust fund I'd never authorized. "When did she give you this?" I held up a screenshot showing a Visa card with my daughter's name embossed across the front. She pulled her knees to her chest, defensive. 3 months ago, for emergencies." "What kind of emergencies?" "I don't know. In case you—" She stopped, her teeth catching her bottom lip. The unfinished sentence hung between us like smoke. "In case I— What? In case I died? In case I couldn't provide?" My pulse hammered at my temples, each beat a tiny explosion behind my eyes. Robert appeared in the doorway, his frame filling it. "Olivia, you're scaring her." I spun toward him, my daughter's phone still clutched in my hand. Did you know about the credit card? He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The hesitation told me everything. My free hand curled into a fist at my side, nails biting crescents into my palm. I turned back to my daughter, whose eyes had gone glassy with unshed tears. Behind the fear, though, I saw something else. Resentment, maybe, or the beginning of it. Patricia had been cultivating this, nurturing small seeds of doubt about me, positioning herself as the reliable one, the fun one, the one who understood. I swiped to the text messages between them. Hundreds scrolled past, entire conversations about clothes and boys and school drama. Normal grandmother things, except woven through were other messages. Subtle ones. Your mom works so hard, you must barely see her. When I was raising your dad, I always made time for family dinners. You can always stay with me if you need space. My jaw ached from clenching. I scrolled further back to messages from 8 months ago, right after I'd picked up that extra shift rotation. Patricia's words dripped with manufactured concern. I worry about you being alone so much. What if something happened? You know you can always call me, right? Day or night. I'll always be here for you. The phone slipped in my sweat-slicked palm. I navigated to her Instagram, pulling up the post from yesterday. My daughter and Patricia at some boutique downtown, matching designer bags hanging from their wrists. The caption read, Grandma knows what I need before I even ask. Blessed, Chus family first. 3,000 likes. Comments from her friends saying they wished they had a grandmother like that. Comments from Patricia's circle praising what a wonderful job she was doing, stepping up. My breath came faster, shallower. The room tilted slightly. I closed the phone and pressed my forehead against the cool edge of the desk. The polished wood smelled like lemon oil and money. Patricia's cleaning service came twice a week. My stomach churned with the realization that I was surrounded by her life, her carefully constructed world, and she'd been slowly pulling my children into it while positioning me as the outsider. Footsteps creaked overhead. Someone was upstairs. I straightened, muscles coiling with sudden tension. The house was supposed to be empty. Patricia had mentioned appointments, errands that would keep her out until evening. My pulse hammered against my throat as I stood, the leather chair rolling backward and bumping against the wall with a soft thud. The footsteps moved across what sounded like the master bedroom, heavy and deliberate. Not Patricia's light tread. I eased toward the office door, each step measured and silent against the hardwood. The knife from Patricia's letter opener sat on the desk behind me, its brass handle gleaming in the afternoon light streaming through the windows. I glanced back at it, my fingers twitching. Another footstep, then another, moving toward the hallway. I slipped into the corridor, pressing myself against the wall beside the staircase. The banister rose before me, ornate spindles casting striped shadows across the Persian runner. My breathing slowed as I listened, counting the seconds between sounds. Professional training kicked in. Assess, evaluate, respond. 12 years as an ER nurse had taught me how to stay calm when adrenaline spiked. A door opened upstairs. The master bedroom. I heard drawers sliding, the distinct sound of someone rifling through contents. Not searching frantically, methodically, like they knew exactly what they wanted. I started up the stairs, keeping to the edges where the wood wouldn't groan. The banister felt smooth and cold under my palm. At the landing, I paused. The bedroom door stood half open, afternoon light spilling into the hallway. Through the gap, I saw a man's silhouette moving past the bed. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark suit jacket draped over the chair by the window. I pushed the door wider. It swung on well-oiled hinges, completely silent. He stood with his back to me, hunched over Patricia's dresser, her jewelry box open before him. But he wasn't taking anything. He was putting something in. A small black device, no bigger than a matchbox. His fingers worked quickly, tucking it behind a stack of silk scarves. "Find what you're looking for?" He spun. The man was maybe 40, clean-shaven, with the kind of forgettable face that would blend into any crowd. His eyes widened for a split second before his expression smoothed into professional neutrality. A small pin on his lapel caught the light, some kind of security firm logo. "Mrs. Crawford asked me to install—" "I'm Mrs. Crawford." I stepped fully into the room, blocking the doorway. "Patricia is Mrs. Crawford Sr." "And she didn't mention any security installation." His hand drifted toward his jacket pocket. I tracked the movement, my weight shifting forward onto the balls of my feet. Whatever was in that pocket, I wouldn't let him reach it. "There must be some confusion." His voice remained steady, practiced. "I have a work order for this address." "Show me." He moved his hand toward his inside pocket, slowly, making a show of it. But his eyes flicked past me, toward the door, calculating. I'd seen that look before, in patients about to bolt, in family members about to become violent. The body telegraphed intention seconds before action. I lunged forward as he made his move. His shoulder drove toward my chest, trying to barrel past. My hand caught his jacket, fabric bunching in my fist as I pivoted, using his momentum to swing him sideways. He crashed into the dresser. The jewelry box toppled, sending necklaces and bracelets scattering across the floor in a glittering cascade. He recovered faster than I expected. His elbow came up, aimed at my face. I ducked, felt the air whistle past my ear. My knee drove into his thigh, not the groin, that was too obvious, too easy to block, but the muscle cluster above his knee. His leg buckled. We went down together, grappling. My shoulder hit the floor first, pain exploding through the joint. His weight pressed on top of me, crushing the air from my lungs. I twisted, got my forearm under his chin, pushed back. His hand scrambled across the floor, searching for purchase, for a weapon, for anything. His fingers closed around something. A heavy perfume bottle from Patricia's collection. Crystal. Old. Probably worth more than my car payment. He swung it toward my temple. I rolled. The bottle smashed into the hardwood where my head had been, exploding into hundreds of glittering shards. The scent of roses filled the air, cloying and thick. My hand found his wrist, squeezed the pressure point. He grunted, dropped the bottle's broken neck. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. His body went rigid beneath me. Someone had called the police. Maybe a neighbor heard the crash. Maybe the security system I'd triggered downstairs. His eyes met mine, and I saw something shift in them. Resignation, or perhaps recalculation. "She's going to win," he whispered. "You know that, right? She always does." I released his wrist and rolled off him, scrambling backward across the glass-strewn floor. Shards bit into my palms, drawing blood. The sirens were louder now, maybe 2 blocks away. He lay there on his back, chest heaving, not moving to attack again. Just staring at the ceiling with that defeated expression that made my stomach twist. The front door burst open downstairs. Heavy footsteps thundered through the foyer. Multiple sets, moving fast and coordinated. "Police! Anyone in the house? Identify yourself!" I opened my mouth to respond, but movement caught my eye. Patricia stood in the bedroom doorway, perfectly composed despite the chaos. Her silver hair was immaculate, not a strand out of place. She held her phone in one hand, screen still glowing. Behind her, I could see my reflection in the hallway mirror, wild-eyed, bleeding, clothes torn. I looked like the criminal. "Up here, officers!" Her voice carried that perfect balance of fear and authority. "Please hurry! She attacked us!" My breath caught in my throat. The man on the floor, her accomplice, her private investigator, whatever the hell he was, slowly sat up. He touched his lip where I'd split it, examined the blood on his fingers. Our eyes met again, and this time I saw it clearly. He was just a paid employee. Whatever happened next, he'd follow Patricia's script. The footsteps pounded up the stairs. 3 officers, maybe 4. I could hear their equipment rattling, the scratch of radio static. My hands were still bleeding, leaving prints on the hardwood. The perfume bottle's jagged remains lay between us like evidence. I forced myself to stand, ignoring the protest from my shoulder. Glass fragments fell from my clothes, tinkling against the floor. My legs shook but held. Patricia's eyes tracked every movement, calculating, adjusting her performance to match whatever I did. The first officer appeared in the doorway, weapon drawn, but pointed at the floor. Young, maybe 30, with the kind of careful wariness that came from responding to too many domestic calls. His partner flanked him immediately, a woman with sharp eyes that took in the entire scene in one sweep. "Hands where I can see them! Both of you!" I raised my palms, felt the sting of cuts reopening. Blood dripped down my wrists. The man on the floor complied more slowly, his movements theatrical, wounded. Patricia pressed herself against the doorframe, playing the frightened victim perfectly. "Thank God you're here. She just came in and attacked poor Daniel. He was only trying to help me organize some paperwork." Daniel. So that was his name. I filed it away, along with every other detail I'd need when this went to court. "Ma'am, we need you to step into the hallway," the female officer said, gesturing to Patricia. Her tone was gentle but firm. Patricia hesitated just long enough to seem reluctant before complying, casting one more fearful glance back at me. The male officer moved closer to me, his eyes scanning the destruction. Overturned furniture, scattered jewelry, broken glass, and blood. So much blood. Most of it was mine, but that wouldn't matter in the initial report. I'd broken into Patricia's home. That's how it would read. "I'm Olivia Crawford," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline crash starting to hit. "This is my mother-in-law's house. I came here because—" "Save it for the statement," the officer interrupted. He pulled out handcuffs, the metal glinting under the bedroom lights. "Turn around, hands behind your back." The room tilted slightly, my vision grayed at the edges. The shoulder I'd landed on throbbed with each heartbeat, and I wondered distantly if something was fractured. But I turned around, crossed my wrists behind my back. The cuffs clicked shut, cold and tight against my skin. Through the doorway, I could hear Patricia talking to the other officers. Her voice carried clearly, each word carefully chosen. "She's been unstable since my son died. The grief, you understand. We've tried to help, but she became paranoid, saying terrible things about our family. We never thought she'd turn violent." Daniel was on his feet now, being helped by the second male officer who'd appeared. He limped convincingly, though I knew I hadn't hurt him that badly. His testimony would corroborate Patricia's story. 2 against 1. The officer guided me toward the door with a firm hand on my elbow. Each step sent fresh pain shooting through my shoulder. We passed Patricia in the hallway. She looked at me with such perfect concern, such maternal worry, that anyone watching would think she genuinely cared. "I hope you get help, Olivia," she said softly. "The children ask about you constantly." My children. The words hit harder than any physical blow. I lunged forward without thinking, and the officer's grip tightened immediately, yanking me back. Patricia flinched dramatically, raising her hands as if to protect herself. "Easy!" The officer's voice was sharp in my ear. "Don't make this worse!" But it was already worse. As he pulled me toward the stairs, I saw it clearly. The small smile that flickered across Patricia's face when she thought no one was looking. Triumphant, victorious. I had the documents. I had witnesses. And now she had a police report showing I was dangerous, unstable, violent. Everything she needed to take my children if anything happened to me. Story Block 7. The holding cell smelled of industrial cleaner and stale urine. I sat on the metal bench, my injured shoulder throbbing with each heartbeat. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in sickly yellow tones. My phone, purse, and the flash drive, all confiscated at booking. Evidence locked away where it couldn't help me. Through the bars, I watched officers move past. Some glanced at me with indifference, others with something darker, judgment already rendered based on whatever Patricia had told them. My hands still bore red marks from the zip ties they'd used during transport. I pressed my palms against the cold concrete wall, needing the shock of temperature to ground me. Hours crawled by. No water offered, no explanation given. My throat felt raw from the altercation, from screaming my innocence in the patrol car. The booking officer had entered my information with mechanical efficiency, not meeting my eyes even once. Assault, trespassing, resisting arrest. Each charge read aloud like nails in a coffin. The lawyer arrived near midnight, a young woman with sharp features and tired eyes, appointed by the court. She introduced herself as something, Jessica. I couldn't focus on the name. She sat across from me in the consultation room, a scratched plastic table between us, and flipped through papers attached to a clipboard. "Mrs. Crawford, the charges are serious. Given the family relationship, the prosecutor might push for a restraining order." My stomach dropped. "A restraining order means I can't see my children." "That's typically how it works with domestic incidents." She tapped her pen against the papers. "Tell me what happened." I laid it out. The funeral discovery, the documents, Patricia's conspiracy. The words tumbled faster as I spoke, desperation creeping into my voice. The lawyer's expression never changed, professional neutrality that felt like disbelief. "Do you have proof? The documents you mentioned?" "On a flash drive. They took it when they booked me." She made a note. "I'll request it as evidence for your defense. But Mrs. Crawford, breaking into someone's home severely undermines your credibility. The prosecution will argue you're unstable, possibly dangerous to your children." The consultation ended with promises to file motions, to argue for reasonable bail. She left me with forms to sign, medical consent for the shoulder injury I'd refused treatment for. The guard escorted me back to the cell. 3 other women occupied it now, one sleeping in the corner, 2 others talking in low voices that stopped when I entered. I claimed the same bench and closed my eyes. Pain radiated from my shoulder down my arm. Every position hurt. I shifted, trying to find relief, and felt something sharp in my jacket pocket. They'd missed it during the cursory pat-down. My fingers closed around the folded paper, the photocopy I'd made of Patricia's handwritten notes before digitizing everything. The paper felt substantial despite being thin. Proof. Real, physical proof. I kept my hand in my pocket, palm flat against the document. If they found it, they'd confiscate it like everything else. But for now, I had something. Morning came with harsh overhead lights flooding on without warning. A different guard appeared, calling names for processing. Mine wasn't among them. The other women filed out, and I was alone again. My stomach cramped with hunger. The last meal felt like days ago rather than hours. Around 10, the guard returned. "Crawford, you've made bail." I stood too quickly, and the room tilted. Black spots danced across my vision. The guard waited with obvious impatience while I steadied myself against the wall. He led me through corridors painted institutional beige, through doors requiring keycards and buzzers. The processing room held my belongings in a clear plastic bag. I signed for them with shaking hands, my signature barely legible. The flash drive was there, thank God. I clutched it tightly while gathering my other items. No phone charger meant it was dead weight, but I tucked it away regardless. The guard pointed toward the exit. "Someone's waiting for you outside." I pushed through the heavy doors into harsh sunlight. Squinting, I made out a figure standing beside a silver sedan. My heart lurched. Another trick, another trap. But as my eyes adjusted, I recognized him. Marcus Brennan, my late husband's law partner. We'd met twice at firm events, exchanged pleasantries over cocktails. He approached now with cautious steps, hands visible and non-threatening. "Mrs. Crawford, I heard what happened through courthouse channels." His voice was measured, professional. "I posted your bail. We should talk." I wanted to ask why, to demand explanations, but exhaustion made the words stick in my throat. Instead, I nodded and followed him to the car. The leather seat felt impossibly soft after the metal bench. He started the engine and pulled into traffic without pressing for conversation. 10 minutes passed before he spoke again. "Your husband mentioned concerns before he died, about his mother's involvement in the children's lives." My head snapped toward him. "What kind of concerns?" "He asked me to draft guardianship papers. Wanted to ensure that if anything happened to both of you, the children wouldn't go to Patricia." Marcus merged onto the highway, eyes forward. "He never signed them. Said he didn't want to upset you with morbid talk." The revelation hit like physical force. My husband had known, had suspected, and I'd been too wrapped up in grief to see the signs. "The papers he drafted, do they still exist?" "In our files. They won't hold up in court since he never signed them, but they demonstrate intent." The car pulled into a downtown parking garage, concrete pillars casting shadows across Marcus's face. I followed him through a side entrance of the law firm, my legs moving mechanically despite the exhaustion settling deep in my bones. The building was nearly empty at this hour, fluorescent lights humming overhead as we passed darkened offices. Marcus unlocked a conference room and gestured me inside. Through the windows, the city spread out below, thousands of lights twinkling against the darkness. He disappeared for a moment and returned carrying a thick accordion folder, papers spilling from its edges. The sound of the folder hitting the polished table made me flinch. "Everything's here. Phone records showing Patricia's coordination with the daycare to deny you access. Financial statements proving she withdrew funds from the children's accounts without authorization. Emails between her and her attorney from 3 months ago, before your husband died." My hands trembled as I reached for the papers. The first email was dated February 10th. My husband hadn't passed until April 23rd. The words swam before my eyes. Preparatory guardianship measures and streamlined custody transition. She'd been planning this while he was still alive. The room tilted. I gripped the table edge, knuckles whitening. Marcus produced a water bottle from somewhere, pressed it into my palm. The cold plastic anchored me, brought the world back into focus. "There's more." He pulled out a manila envelope, unsealed it carefully. Photographs spilled across the table. Surveillance photos. Me at the grocery store. Me at the pharmacy. Me picking up the children from school, or trying to. The timestamps showed they went back 5 months. She hired a private investigator, was building a case against you before your husband even got sick. My throat constricted. The methodical nature of it, the calculated patience. Patricia had orchestrated everything. The house cameras, the school restrictions, the court papers filed within days of my husband's funeral. She'd been laying groundwork, positioning pieces on a chessboard I hadn't known we were playing on. A sound erupted from my chest, something between a laugh and a sob. I pressed my fist against my mouth, forcing it down. No time for breaking, no time for weakness. Can we use this? Some of it. The unauthorized withdrawals are actionable. The emails prove premeditation. Marcus began organizing the papers into stacks, his movements efficient and precise. But we need more. We need to prove she's unfit, not just opportunistic. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen showed a text from an unknown number. 2 words. Check attachments. 3 video files downloaded automatically. My finger hovered over the first one, then pressed play. The footage was grainy, night vision quality, but clear enough. Patricia's house, the side entrance. A man I didn't recognize entered carrying a briefcase at 11:47 p.m., according to the timestamp. He emerged 18 minutes later without it. Who is that? Marcus leaned closer to the screen. I don't know. The second video showed the same man 3 days later. Different briefcase, same furtive entrance. The third video was different. Daytime footage from inside what looked like Patricia's home office. The camera angle suggested someone had hidden a phone or small recorder. Patricia sat at her desk, the man across from her. She pushed an envelope across the polished wood. The judge has been very cooperative. Patricia's voice crackled through my phone's speaker. Another 3,000 ensures he remains so. The man's response was muffled, but Patricia's laugh came through clearly. My son left Olivia everything. That was his mistake. Once I have custody, I'll have access to the children's inheritance. Their dear grandmother will manage it appropriately. The video ended. Marcus's face had gone pale. He grabbed my phone, rewound it, played it again. His jaw clenched tighter with each replay. This is jury tampering, bribery. If this is real, it's real. The text came from whoever had sent the surveillance videos, whoever had infiltrated Patricia's world and documented her corruption. My phone rang, unknown number again. I answered without thinking, pressed it to my ear. Mrs. Crawford. A woman's voice, young, familiar somehow. I'm Catherine Chen. I used to be Patricia's personal assistant. The name clicked into place. I'd met her once at a family gathering, a quiet girl who'd seemed nervous around Patricia's sharp tongue. I've been documenting everything for 8 months. She fired me when I questioned some financial irregularities, threatened to destroy my career if I talked. Catherine's words came fast, urgent. But I kept copies of everything. She's stealing from the Children's Trust Fund. She's bribing Judge Harrison, and she's planning to have you declared mentally incompetent permanently. My free hand clenched into a fist. The conference room suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. Through the window, police lights flashed somewhere in the distance, red and blue streaks against the darkness. Meet me at the Federal Building. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. Bring Marcus Brennan. Catherine's voice dropped to a whisper. She knows I took the files. I don't have much time. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly, met Marcus's eyes across the table. He was already reaching for his coat, already moving. We had 12 hours to organize everything, to build a case that would dismantle Patricia's carefully constructed lies. I gathered the scattered photographs, the emails, the evidence of months of manipulation. My hands were steady now, purpose burning through the exhaustion. Patricia had made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated how many people she'd hurt, how many witnesses she'd created through her cruelty. Avoid these names: Patricia, Catherine, Marcus, Harrison. The federal building loomed against the dawn sky, all concrete and glass catching the first light. I pushed through the heavy doors at 6:45, Marcus a solid presence beside me. My briefcase felt weighted with more than documents. It carried the future of my children, the dismantling of Patricia's empire of lies. Catherine stood near the security checkpoint, thinner than I remembered, dark circles shadowing her eyes. She clutched a leather portfolio against her chest like armor. When she saw us, her shoulders sagged with visible relief. We didn't speak until we were in a windowless conference room on the 4th floor. Federal Agent Reynolds sat across from us, his expression unreadable as Catherine spread files across the table. Bank statements, forged signatures, emails discussing my deteriorating mental state with doctors who'd never examined me, wire transfers from the Children's Trust to offshore accounts. "Judge Harrison receives monthly payments through a consulting firm that doesn't exist?" Catherine said, her finger tracing a paper trail. "Patricia owns it through 3 shell companies." My breath caught. The scope of the corruption spread before me like a map of devastation. I reached for a document showing my own signature, perfectly forged on a power of attorney I'd never signed. Agent Reynolds leaned forward, his pen moving rapidly across a notepad. He asked Catherine 3 questions, his voice clinical, detached. She answered each with precision, pointing to evidence, explaining connections. Marcus sat beside me, his hand briefly touching my shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that steadied my racing pulse. The agent made a phone call, then another. Within 30 minutes, 2 more federal investigators entered the room, followed by an assistant district attorney whose reputation I knew from news coverage. I was relentless in corruption cases, had taken down a senator the previous year. They questioned me for 2 hours. Every detail of the past months spilled out: the guardianship petition, the staged incidents, the systematic isolation from my children. I described finding the photographs, the meetings with specialists, the evidence Marcus had helped me compile. My voice remained level, factual. I'd learned that emotion could be mistaken for instability, that Patricia had trained everyone to see my passion as proof of incompetence. By 9 a.m., arrest warrants were being prepared. Judge Harrison, Patricia. A doctor named Thompson who'd signed evaluation forms without ever meeting me. The assistant DA made notes on a yellow legal pad, her questions sharp and focused. "We'll need your children interviewed by Child Services," she said, meeting my eyes directly. "Neutral professionals, can you arrange that?" I nodded. The thought of Emma and James being questioned, even gently, made my stomach clench, but it was necessary. Their voices needed to be heard without Patricia's shadow looming over them. Marcus drove me home through mid-morning traffic. Neither of us spoke much. The weight of what we'd set in motion pressed against my chest. Police would be at Patricia's estate within hours. Her attorneys would mobilize. The legal battle was far from over, but the terrain had shifted dramatically. My phone rang as we pulled into my driveway. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, then something made me press accept. "Mom?" Emma's voice, small and frightened. "Grandmother is throwing things. She's screaming about you, about files. She told someone to pack her bags. Mom, what's happening?" I closed my eyes, gripped the phone tighter. "Baby, listen to me. Stay in your room with James. Lock the door. Don't come out until you see police officers." "Police?" Her voice cracked with confusion. "Trust me, they're coming to help. I love you. Keep your brother safe." I ended the call, already dialing Agent Reynolds. He answered on the first ring. I explained the situation in clipped sentences. He confirmed units were already en route, told me to stay away from the estate, but I was already out of Marcus's car, already moving toward my own vehicle. He called after me, his objection clear. I ignored him. My children were in that house with a woman whose world was collapsing, whose carefully constructed fortress was crumbling. Patricia was dangerous on her best days. Cornered, she would be unpredictable. The drive took 12 minutes. I broke speed limits, ran 2 yellow lights that turned red. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. Patricia's gate stood open when I arrived. Ominous, wrong. 2 squad cars were parked in the circular driveway, their lights silent but spinning. I ran toward the entrance. An officer tried to stop me, but I pushed past, my voice sharp with maternal authority. Inside, the grand foyer was chaos. Patricia stood at the base of the sweeping staircase, her silver hair disheveled, her face contorted with rage. 2 officers flanked her, and a detective was reading rights from a card. Her eyes found mine across the marble expanse. For one suspended moment, we stared at each other. I saw everything there, the fury, the disbelief, the calculation already working behind her expression. She'd underestimated me. Treated me like a weak link to be manipulated, never expecting I'd find allies, never imagining I'd fight back with her own weapons of documentation and legal precision. "You've destroyed this family," Patricia hissed, her voice venomous. I walked closer, my footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. "No, I saved it." Storyblock 1010. The handcuffs clicked around Patricia's wrists with a sound that echoed through the foyer like a final punctuation mark. She jerked away from the officers, but they held firm. Her designer suit was wrinkled, her makeup smudged around her eyes where tears of rage had carved through the powder. I watched them guide her toward the door, her heels clicking in irregular rhythm against the marble. My daughters emerged from the library where a social worker had kept them occupied. Their faces were pale, confused. I knelt and pulled them both into my arms, breathing in their familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and crayons. Their small bodies trembled against mine, and I pressed my lips to their foreheads, whispering promises I intended to keep. 6 months later, I stood in my new kitchen, sunlight streaming through windows I'd chosen myself. The house was smaller than the one I'd shared with Patricia's son, but every corner belonged to me. No hidden cameras, no locked doors, no whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. The breakfast table was scattered with my daughter's art supplies. Watercolors stained the wood despite the newspapers I'd spread underneath. I smiled, running my fingers over the mess. This disorder was mine to accept or clean, my choice entirely. My phone buzzed with a text from my attorney. Patricia's trial date was set. The evidence had been overwhelming. The falsified medical records, the forged documents claiming my mental instability, the custody papers prepared months in advance. Her lawyer was negotiating a plea deal, but the criminal charges would stand. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted custodial interference. The words carried weight in legal terms, but to me they translated simply, my children were safe. I poured coffee into a mug my youngest had decorated with lopsided hearts. Through the window, I could see the small backyard where they played on a second-hand swing set I'd assembled myself. The chains creaked rhythmically as they pushed each other higher, their laughter carrying on the morning breeze. My mother arrived at 9, letting herself in with the key I'd given her without hesitation. She carried grocery bags filled with ingredients for Sunday dinner, a tradition we were rebuilding. She set them on the counter and pulled me into a hug that smelled like cocoa butter and home. "You look good," she said, studying my face with maternal scrutiny. I did look good. The tension that had carved lines around my mouth had softened. My shoulders no longer hunched forward in perpetual defensive posture. I slept through nights now, my body finally believing what my mind knew. The danger had passed. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find the support group coordinator from the community center. She held flyers for the workshop I'd agreed to lead, recognizing coercive control in family dynamics. My story, sanitized for public consumption but honest in its bones, would help other women identify the warning signs I'd nearly missed. We sat at the kitchen table, reviewing the schedule while my daughters played in the next room. Their voices drifted through the doorway, negotiating the rules of some elaborate imaginary game. Normal childhood sounds in a normal home. The simplicity of it made my throat tight. My new job at the nonprofit started next week. The salary was less than I'd earned before, but the work mattered. Advocacy for vulnerable families, education about elder abuse and custodial manipulation. I'd turned my nightmare into expertise, my fear into purpose. That afternoon, I took the girls to the park. They raced ahead on the path, their sneakers slapping against concrete. I followed at a slower pace, savoring the warmth on my face. Other families scattered across the grass, fathers pushing strollers, mothers spreading picnic blankets, grandparents chasing toddlers. Ordinary moments that once felt impossible now filled my weekends. At the playground, I pushed my youngest on the swings while the oldest practiced cartwheels nearby. Her form was terrible, limbs flying in enthusiastic chaos, but her joy was perfect. I caught myself laughing, the sound surprising in its ease. Evening fell with that golden quality particular to late spring. I made dinner in my small kitchen, nothing fancy, just pasta and vegetables. We ate at the table with mismatched plates, no formal dining room or crystal glasses. My daughters chattered about school, about friends, about the butterfly they'd seen with wings like stained glass. After bedtime routines and story time, I stood in their doorway watching them sleep. Their faces were peaceful, unmarked by the trauma they'd witnessed. Therapy was helping, the counselor assured me. Children were resilient when they felt safe. I intended to spend the rest of my life ensuring their safety, not from distant theoretical threats, but from the concrete dangers I now recognized. Later, in my own room, I opened my laptop and began writing. The blog I'd started was gaining followers, other women sharing their stories, offering support, asking questions. I typed responses until midnight, each message a small act of rebellion against the silence that had nearly destroyed me. The house settled around me with comfortable sounds. No footsteps in hallways where no one should be. No whispered phone calls behind closed doors. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a neighborhood dog, the wind rustling trees outside my window. I'd survived. More than survived, I'd rebuilt. My children were mine, their futures secure under my protection. Patricia sat in a cell awaiting judgment, her influence shattered. The family that had tried to erase me now existed only as a cautionary tale I shared in workshops and support groups. Justice, I'd learned, came in multiple forms. Sometimes it wore a judge's robes and carried a gavel. Sometimes it looked like an ordinary Tuesday morning in a sunny kitchen with children's laughter as background music. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.